I'm the chef that cooks death row inmates their last meal. I always add in a secret ingredient. The botched execution of Norton Carraway, the most prolific serial killer you've never heard of, should have made national headlines for weeks. But Carraway was so much more than your average garden variety killer, and the factors that made his case so special also made it embarrassing for powerful people who had the influence to make these types of stories go away. That meant in the hours that followed, I had very little information to go on. Just the details I'd seen firsthand in the witness gallery, and the gnawing feeling it was all my fault. I paced until I thought I'd wear a hole in my apartment floor, replaying the events in the hopes that some logical explanation would let me off the hook. Guards led Carraway into the chamber, scalp shaved bald. They restrained him in the electric chair, the method he had so hard in court to be his execution method. When the executioner threw the lever, Carraway convulsed. I kept waiting for the shaking to stop. Instead, it worsened. I don't think I'll ever forget the screaming and the smell of burning skin. Prison staff shut the curtains to the witness gallery and rushed us out. I left knowing he was still alive and silently prayed with each passing moment that I would get the call confirming his death. When my cell phone finally rang, it was Warden Paul Perkins calling from his personal number. I answered. "Hello?" He said, "We need to talk about Carraway's last meal." My blood ran cold. What did he know? How could he know? I've never driven so fast. It's a miracle I didn't get pulled over. I reached the prison before dawn. The place looks like an old high school wrapped up in barbed wire. An uneasy silence filled the long, sterile corridors. The guards I passed looked twitchy and unnerved. The whole prison seemed to be on its feet, waiting for something. The warden greeted me in his modest office, all bookshelves and filing cabinets with a small window overlooking the plains. "It's been a long night." He gestured toward 2 steaming mugs of coffee on his desk. "I didn't think you stayed for executions," Paul said, lowering himself into his chair with a huff. "Why was last night different?" I studied his pudgy face, normally bright, kind and clean-shaven. This morning his eyes were bloodshot. "A victim approached me," I said. "Rebecca. She tracked me down and knocked on my door." I gave him a grain of truth, something he may know anyway. It made this case feel more personal. The poor woman had looked so thin, like she'd forgotten to eat. Mismatched, wrinkled clothes. Paul just looked at me, expectant. I continued. "I felt awful for her, so I invited her in, made her dinner, then let her talk about her daughter. I know you were doing a nice thing, but I'd be careful around her," Paul said. He took a sip of coffee and smacked his lips. "When Rebecca's daughter went missing, did you know that she was the prime suspect?" "No, I didn't. A lot of people up in that tiny town still believe Rebecca is the strangler." Paul set the coffee down. "In the early days, back when it was only a disappearance, a K9 officer paid her a visit. He wanted one of Daniela's favorite stuffed animals, something to let the dogs catch her scent. You know what they found instead?" I shook my head. "Weird stuff. Runes, weird little dolls, and animal bones. She told the cops she'd been doing a ritual to bring her baby back," Paul said. "She couldn't tell them where she was when Daniela went missing, so they booked her. Carraway was well-trained, disciplined, and waited as long as he could, I expect. But that urge," he trailed off. He couldn't help himself. "Point is, Rebecca might not have done anything to her daughter, but she's not safe or sane. I'm getting sidetracked, though. The execution. You stayed out of sympathy then?" "Sure, you could call it that," I said. "Okay," Paul nodded. "Well, things got a bit hectic after you left. Shall I fill you in?" I nodded. The executioner cut off the power at the 20-minute mark. Way longer than it's supposed to take. Paul took a deep breath. By that point, Carraway looked like a half-used candle. He wasn't just alive, he was coherent, begging for death, Paul said. "How is that possible?" I asked. I knew exactly how. The question was, did the warden? "Problem with the chair, maybe?" The warden shrugged. "I made the call to overwrite his wishes. He got the lethal injection and stopped breathing at 3:45. Carraway was dead." I relaxed a little in my chair, but tried not to show a change in my posture. "Why did you get into this job, Kathy?" Paul asked. The shift in questioning caught me off guard. Where was he going with this? "Honestly?" I asked. "I hate when you say that," he said. "Implies you've been dishonest about everything else." I said, "I picked a terrible time to be a chef, restaurants going under right and left." "What was it? 25% in the whole country that year?" "Something like that," Paul agreed. "Any halfway decent owner wanted a chef with serious culinary experience," I said. "You were my only option." "Cooking last meals for death row inmates has its perks," Paul said. "No bad reviews to worry about, no repeat customers either. The ideal learning environment." He curled his lips into a smile. "But that was years ago. You've got your degree now. More than enough talent and experience. Anyone would have hired you." "I like the challenge," I said. "I mean, you're cooking someone's last meal. You only get one of those. Unless you're Norton Carraway." "No other reason?" the warden asked. I answered honestly, "No." He leaned in. "You didn't ever like to mess with them?" "Who?"